What's up, guys? You are listening to the Coach Sam Show, spelled Coach 5 a.m. I'm a coach in a bunch of different roles. One of those is a fitness coach, where I lead 5 a.m. workouts 5 times a week. I'm the football coach at Hanover High School. I'm also a leadership coach for small businesses and teams. And then I'm also a part of an awesome group that's heading up the school Train Up Academy. And that group includes my wife and two of our closest friends, Ben and Alyssa Smith. You'll hear all about that and more, but my hope is that you learn more about leadership, you learn more about what it means to be a great husband and a great dad, and you learn about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I don't have all the answers, but we're going to explore those together. Can't wait for you guys to listen. Hope you enjoy it. All right, guys, today's inequality is going to be love is greater than fear. And I will tell you, there is no inequality that has challenged me more than love over fear, especially as a coach of a high school football team. How do I create this culture of love and not this culture of fear, right? And I know if you interviewed 95% of our players, they would probably say that they're scared to make a mistake. They feel like there's like this gotcha mentality. And I'm trying to explore what it looks like to still hold high standards, but make sure we are matching that with our love and care for each individual. And that's not an easy process. I find that harder coaching the high school players and the high school boys than I do creating that culture within our coaching staff, right? It's easier peer to peer. It's not as easy to the players. Now, you might struggle with the same thing, even peer to peer, or even with the people that you're leading. You might feel like you need to dominate from fear, from this fear-based approach to leadership. I don't think we do. One, I don't think Scripture aligns with that mentality. And also, there's actually been more and more studies coming out that show it's this phrase called psychological safety. And to be honest, I don't love that term, but it's this phrase that really means creating fearless organizations, creating fearless teams. How do you create these teams that aren't scared to fail, that aren't scared to disappoint the leader, that aren't scared of the worst possible outcome? When you have these teams that are all in together on that, okay, they're not scared to fail. They're not scared to disappoint the leader. They're not scared of worst possible outcomes. They're not scared to look stupid. What ends up happening is you have a team that's engaged, that's collaborating, that's holding each other accountable, that's admitting mistakes and helping each other towards solutions and striving towards excellence. So that's the goal, right? Of course, that sounds like a utopian idea, but I truly believe that we can put in the work to do this as leaders. Okay, now, that would be easy, okay, to create that culture if you had a bunch of A++ mentalities on your team. People that weren't victims, people that were all bought into the mission. And we just know the reality of that. Like, sometimes we're not going to get that. Sometimes we don't have the ability to always hire A++ mentalities. And if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we ourselves are not the A++ mentality. So how do we as the leaders create that culture where people are simultaneously striving for excellence, totally bought into the mission, but not scared to fail, right? Not scared to fail. Because what ends up happening as leaders, I sense this with myself, when I sense that other people aren't as bought in as me, when they're not as bought in as me, I feel like I need to go above and beyond to hold them accountable, to check back in with them and to make sure they're doing the right thing and hold standards and give consequences and all this other stuff. Okay. But the truth is, if these people were able to hold themselves accountable, then that wouldn't matter, right? So how do I get these people to take that next step, to be totally bought into the mission, to be totally bought into what we're doing? Okay. Strive for excellence, admit mistakes. Well, that first step is I have to model it. And we talked about this back from the beginning, but I think love over fear and you over me are really, really closely intertwined. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that when we are leading from this fear-based approach and everybody abide by me and I'm out to get you, when we are leading from that fear-based approach, it is more about us than it is about the team. When we are leading from the love-based approach, It is more about the team. And the truth is, if I can sell everyone on our team, coaching staff and players, on our mission and our why, if I can give them something compelling to latch on to, okay, and I can model what it looks like, me, myself, to admit mistakes, if I can model me, myself, that is not, I'm not always perfect. If I can model myself what it looks like to explore excellence, okay, make mistakes and then get back up and try again, then I hope and I pray that our team would do the exact same thing. All right, so let's go back to this term, psychological safety. Okay, I've been reading this book called The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson, and it studies these different teams and what makes effective teams. And they went into the hospital and they studied different teams within a hospital, and they tried to predict what would make the most effective team. So they did a simple study. They were going to find out how many mistakes were reported, and then they were going to predict who would be the most effective team. And clearly they hypothesized that if there were less mistakes reported, they were going to be a more effective team. But what they found out was the opposite. The more mistakes that were reported led to the more effective teams. And it's not that they were making more mistakes, it's that they were reporting more mistakes. So there were some teams within this hospital that felt more comfortable admitting when they were wrong than others, while simultaneously striving for excellence and striving for the best possible outcome. So then they try to figure out, well, what caused that? What caused there to be some teams that freely admitted when they were wrong? Well, they had leaders who modeled that. Can you model as the leader that you aren't scared to admit when you are wrong? Can you be humble enough to say, I'm not scared to admit when I'm wrong? Can you do that? Can you submit your ego in that way? Can you show them what it looks like to strive for excellence, but also say, hey, I was wrong, and I want to go get better? What happens when you do that? You dismiss this certain level of fear for your team where they're no longer going to fear failure. Okay, you're in a leadership position, right? You're the one giving out a lot of feedback. Can you yourself take feedback? Maybe a complaint that you might have is that your team doesn't take feedback well, they don't take coaching well. Well, do you allow them to give you feedback? I have really found this. When I allow my team to give me feedback, when I allow our coaches to give me feedback, I am much more able to give them feedback without letting ego distort things. When I show them, when I honestly beg them, hey, give me feedback. I need it. I promise you, I'm not gonna get mad at you. I want this feedback. When we model that, what that looks like as leaders, then you're able to give them feedback out of love and out of care for them. Okay. Are the people on my staff and are the people that I'm leading, the players, okay, are they fearful of disappointing me, or are they striving to get better? Because if they're just fearful of disappointing me, then I'm going to limit what they can do. Here's the tricky part. Fear does yield some results. It just doesn't yield the most, right? Like if I'm constantly having to hold each individual accountable on our team, think about the 70 players on a team. If I have to hold each individual accountable, that'll yield some results. But if we have a culture where each player is holding each other accountable, then we're going to yield a lot of results. If they're not fearful of disappointing me, but they are striving towards the mission, towards the goal, towards pursuing excellence, if they are doing that, obviously that's going to yield more results than them just doing something because I told them that they need to do that. Our goal is to create this fearless organization. Now, again, I think I'm better at doing that with our staff than I am with our team. And I want to explore what that looks like to do that within our team. The hard part is to be able to hold high standards and still create fearlessness. Now, there's 3 questions of connection that I think are really important, and you can't hold people accountable without connection. Okay, there's 3 questions of connection. Okay, this first one is, do you care for me? Do you care for me? So I want you to think about this. Every person is subconsciously asking that question to themselves before they allow you to hold them accountable. Do you care for me? Right? The second one is, can I trust you? Can I trust you? And that last one is, can you help me? Can you help me? So, do you care for me? Can I trust you? Can you help me? If people don't think that you care about them, if they just think that you're out to get them, they're not going to allow you to hold them accountable. So, not just in one-time conversations, but in multiple conversations, we've got to be able to show the people that we're leading, hey, I care about you and I'm for you. I'm not out to get you. I'm not out to get you. I am here to help, and I want us to strive towards our mission together. And I will admit when I fall short of this, and I will get back up and I will try to pursue it again. But there's not going to be an ego attached to me. Okay. But when I can show my team that I care for them, I am much more able to hold them accountable. And I can think of some players that truly do believe that I care about them. But I can also think of some that probably don't believe that I care about them. And I've got to be better with them. Okay. Do you care for me? Can I trust you? Do they trust that what I'm saying is coming from a good place? Okay. But what I'm saying is, as best as I know how, it's the most truthful thing that I can say. It's not a lie. There's not a backdoor angle to what I'm saying. I'm not trying to manipulate them, that they can trust me. Again, you might be thinking of some people on your team that think that they think that they can trust you, and some that think that they can't trust you. And I can think of similar people on both sides for my team as well. All right. Can I trust you? And the last one is, can you help me? Do you have the ability? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the expertise? Do you have even the fortitude to be able to help someone? The reason why I say fortitude, there might be sometimes when you don't know the answer initially, but you've got to go out and you've got to try and find it. You've got to have this resiliency to you to go find that answer and then bring it back to them. Right? So do you care for me? Can I trust you? And can you help me? If in your daily conversations, if in your program, if in your team, you are trying to answer those questions for your team, you are trying to think through those lenses and how you can get your team to answer yes to all of those questions, I bet you are much more likely to hold them accountable. And they're not going to be held accountable out of fear. They will understand that this accountability is out of love. My brother has told me this. He said, accountability without relationship is harassment, right? And that might seem extreme, like they call it harassment, but let's just put it this way. Accountability without relationship is at a very minimum annoying. It's at a very minimum annoying. So we've got to be able to build relationship. We've got to cultivate this culture where people are caring for each other and striving for excellence. They're not fearing failure. They're not fearful of disappointing you. They're not fearful of the worst possible outcome. Because fear is crippling. And again, it can yield some results. I just don't believe that it will yield the most results. Now, here's where I struggle with this specifically as a football coach. I struggle with this because the game is an intense game. And it requires us to be intense and passionate. So I do believe that there is a time and place to be passionate, to yell, to be loud. I believe there's a time and place for that. And honestly, if you came to our practices, you would see that I am like yelling for 90 minutes of those practices, right? Like I'm upbeat and loud and encouraging and challenging, and I lose my voice the entire football season. Right? So I do believe there's a place for that. But I also understand that there are times when I'm way too sharp with my tongue. I'm way too demeaning with what I'm saying. And in those conversations, I end up creating this culture of fear instead of culture of love for them. I end up cutting relationship, and I end up building walls that I don't need to build. What I need to do, what I need to do a great job of, and there's any coaches listening to this, what we need to do a great job of, and honestly, leaders, whenever you have tough conversations and you've got to call people out, what we have to do a great job of is the follow-up conversations. Those follow-up conversations. We've got to be able to go back and be like, hey, do you know why I said that? Do you know why I held you accountable to that? Do you understand why I'm not trying to demean you. I'm not trying to belittle you. I care for you. And I've got to do a much better job with follow-up conversations with each person on our team. Again, it's going back to those 3 questions of connection. I've got to be able to show them, hey, I did that honestly because I care for you. Okay. Now, I'll tell you this. There is a reason that I will yell as a football coach and I will not yell as a leader of a business. There's a reason that I will yell as a football coach and I will not yell as a dad. Okay, so I think there's an important distinction. The reason I'll yell as a football coach is because football demands an intense environment. So think about this. If you're playing middle linebacker and you've got to go take on a fullback who weighs 250 pounds and he's strong, and he's fast, and he's physical, I don't think I'd want a coach kind of just patting me on the back and saying, hey, it's okay, man. Just go in there and do your best. No, I think I'd want someone that's upbeat, that's intense. I've got to have energy that matches the situation. I've got to be able to call them to be passionate and to go run their face right through them, right? Like there's got to be this intensity about them, okay? And in football, if someone doesn't abide by a standard or they miss a tackle, there's this intensity that we're called to. But that intensity can't trump my love for them. I've got to make sure they understand it's all out of love and it's all out of care for them. Whereas when my son doesn't abide by something that I say, there's not an intensity around that conversation. So if I tell him like, hey, you need to finish all your dinner before you have any dessert, right? If you want a treat, you got to finish all your dinner. If I tell him that and he doesn't finish all of his dinner, I'm not just going to rip him and yell at him, because I know that's going to build a wall in that relationship. That situation does not call for that. That situation does not call for there to be an elevated intensity. Okay, the only reason I want to do that in football because the situation calls for that elevated intensity. And I think we can really destroy a relationship when we take one method because of what that requires and we translate that to another method. I'm not going to yell at my son the same way that I would yell during football practice, because that situation does not call for that. I don't want to build the wall there in that relationship. I've got to be really, really careful in football to not build those walls with those players and got to come back and have those conversations with them. And coaches, we don't want to admit this, but there's plenty of times that we've built walls with the athletes that we're coaching instead of building trust with them. We've got to be able to have follow-up conversations. We've got to reiterate the why. We've got to be able to have connection and relationship. And honestly, the bigger your team is, the more important those assistant coaches become, because they get to be these other relationship builders within the team to help build that unified connection. Whereas like if I know I have a great connection with one of the players and another coach yells at them that does not have a great connection with them, I'm able to go up to them and be like, hey, here's his heart on this. Here's what he means by this. We're able to help each other out with that bigger team. But we've got to make sure, even though the situation calls for intensity, that we're not building walls, that we're still building trust, and we're still building care for them. Because what I don't want a fearful team. I don't want a team that is terrified to go make mistakes. I don't want a team that is terrified of disappointing me. I want a team that is fearless. We want to hold high standards. We want to be intense, but we want to cultivate this team that operates in fearlessness, not fearfulness. We got to be able to operate in fearlessness. And if we don't have connection with the people that we're leading, we got no shot. We got no shot. We've got to have connection with them. We've got to have connection with them. And yes, it is our job to be able to set that tone for our team, to be able to motivate them, to be able to care for them. The guy that officiated my wedding, he's a huge friend of mine, huge mentor of mine. He wouldn't call himself my mentor. He would just call himself my friend, but I look up to him in that way, that he's just like a huge mentor. But he always talks about in the context of marriage to operate in expectancy over expectation. Expectancy over expectation. And what he means is expectancy believes the best. Okay, when there's a gap between what you thought was going to happen and then reality, expectancy believes the best in that gap. Okay. Expectation is just disappointed. Expectancy believes the best. Believes the best. So let's keep talking through the context of like your team and leadership. When someone that's working for you or working on your team misses the mark, do we immediately believe the best in them? And more importantly, do they believe that you believe the best in them? You can hold a standard and still believe the best in them. So I'll tell you where I've gone wrong multiple times in this before. Let's just talk about a player that shows up late. We have a standard to be there right at 6:30. Right when that clock hits 6:30 in the morning, we start our team meeting. We have a standard to be there on time. And if they're late, there's consequences to it, especially if it's not communicated in advance why they're late. So say someone strolls in at 6:31. Okay. Expectation immediately just believes the worst and is disappointed. And that person feels that. They feel that disappointment. Expectation immediately rips them. And I've done that before, and I've done it wrongly before. Expectation immediately rips that person. How on earth could you be late? This is just like you. Why would you do this? Yada, 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 yada. And in that whole conversation, you're building a wall. Expectancy still believes the best in them. Hey, this is not like you. Why were you late? What happened? Is everything okay? Are you okay? Expectancy believes the best in that person. Okay, so that first part, when you're trying to be able to hold a standard and you want to operate in expectancy, the first thing you need to think through is believing the best in that person. Then the second one is you have to investigate the why. Investigate why it happened. So if there's a standard on your team that is not met, believe the best and then come back and investigate the why. Figure out why. You can't just believe the best and ignore it. If you have a standard, you need to hold that standard. You need to investigate why that did or did not happen. You investigate why and you talk through it with them. And maybe they'll just say, hey, I'm sorry. I woke up late. It won't happen again. Okay. Hey, no worries. Hey, do you understand why it's important that we're on time? Do you understand like why we even have that standard? Like the reason is because it just sets this culture of excellence and we want to pursue it. You start explaining them through it, explain your heart behind it. Again, it's not you versus them. It's all about why it's important for the team. But expectancy believes the best and investigates the why. Okay, and they might say, hey, I had a really tough situation this morning. My dad's really sick. We had to take him to so-and-so. I tried calling you, but your phone was, whatever it may be. Okay, and they might tell you a legit situation. Okay, you investigate the why and be loving enough to understand when it's not a legit excuse. You're free to ask questions on that. You're free to ask questions on that. Okay, and then you can explain the heart behind it, but you investigate the why. And then you partner on a solution. So you say, hey, in the future, okay, I know you said that your alarm clock wasn't working. Here's what I want you to do. Here's an alarm clock that I think is really, really good. Put this away from your bed. Here's how you set it up. But you partner on a solution. Okay, so there's three things with expectancy. You believe the best, you investigate the why, and you partner on a solution. If you can operate with that, when there's a gap between the standard and reality, if you can operate in that, you will actually build trust when standards aren't met. Okay. I don't want people abiding by standards just because they feel like they have to abide by me. I want them to abide by standards because they believe it's best for them and best for the team. I've got to be able to sell them on that. Because if they're just trying to abide by me when I am not looking, they're not going to do it. I've got to get a team that is bought into doing it just because they want to do it. I've got to get coaches doing it because they want to do it. I've got to be able to sell them on a vision. I've got to be able to sell them why it's good for them and for the team and why it's a worthy thing to be a part of. I've got to be able to set that as the leader, right? And I've got to be able to do that for players. But the great example is like, say we're holding front planks as a football team and we're doing a competition. Whoever drops, loses, or whatever it may be. Say there's a difficult competition. Well, the team that is only abiding by me is going to drop whenever I'm not looking. They're going to drop whenever I'm not looking. The team that wants to be great just for them, whether I was there or not, they would be trying to hold the standard. Okay, so we want to create this fearlessness on the team where they themselves are bought into the mission, not because of me, but because they believe it's best. And as leaders, we've got to be able to sell them on that. This is why I really do advocate for core values and for a mission and make it clear. Core values and mission. We have our core values at Hanover: communication, honor, integrity, and perseverance. We also have 9 inequalities that we talk about that we're going through right now, right? Love over fear is one of them. And then we have our mission that it sets the vision for the entire program. Our mission is to use football to build better husbands and better fathers who show up, love, and don't quit. That's what we want to do. So when we're really clear about that, okay, then we create a team that is striving towards the mission, not striving towards Sam. I've got to create a team. I've got to set the tone for a team that's striving towards a mission and not just striving towards me. And I've got to build a team that cares for each other, that is connected, that is so driven by their love for each other and love for what we're doing that they're not fearful of making mistakes. So some questions to ask yourself: are people fearful of making mistakes because of you, or are they fearful of making mistakes because they don't want to fall short of the mission? If they're fearful because of you, well, then we probably haven't created a culture that will yield the most results. Okay, are they fearful of you? Are they fearful of disappointing you? Are they fearful of giving their opinion and giving feedback? Are they fearful of doing that? Well, if they're fearful of doing that, here's the truth: you're probably limiting where your team can go, because you might find the best ideas in the most unlikely places. And if you are not in the habit of giving your people a voice, it's going to be really, really hard for you to find the best possible way to do things. And the thing that blinds all of these is your ego and my ego. Okay? If we think we are above any type of correction, if we think we are above any type of feedback, we are going to limit what we can do as a team. And you see it all the time. You see people just get stuck in their ways. Create a culture where people aren't fearful of telling you the truth, where people aren't fearful of calling you out. And the way you do that, stop getting so dang offended if someone has a different opinion. The offense will poison you and poison your team. If somebody calls you out, it's a good thing. Invite that. Invite them to do it privately. I would say give them opportunities regularly to give you feedback. It could be as simple as sending out forms to them and be like, hey, once a quarter, I'm going to need feedback on how I'm doing. I want you to be really honest with me, and we're going to have one-on-one meetings and we're going to talk through it. It could be as simple as that. But when you're doing that, you're saying, hey, it's not about my way, it's about the way. And you're creating this culture of fearlessness and striving towards the mission instead of striving towards you. And there's got to be care for each other there. So again, those two little frameworks to think through are those questions of connection. Okay, do you care for me? Can I trust you? Can you help me? Those 3 questions. And then operate in expectancy whenever there's a standard missed instead of expectation. Expectancy believes the best and investigates the why, and it partners on solutions. If you can do those things, you're going to give yourself a really good shot to build this culture of fearlessness. These are not one-time acts. These are consistent in your conversations, in your habits, in your attitudes. Now, how does this apply to being a dad? Well, really similarly. If my sons, if my boys are just terrified of making mistakes in front of me, they're terrified of my disappointment, then they're just going to do things behind my back. I don't want them to be fearful of me. I want them to understand that they can trust me. I want them to understand that what I say is true and good. And when it's not, I'll admit that. But how do I create that level of just love, intimacy, and care with them where they're not striving to meet my standard? They're not striving just to meet me. They're understanding that we're striving towards the standard. We're striving ultimately towards Jesus and who he is, not towards me, because I can be wrong. I can be wrong at times. So I want to create that culture of love for them. So again, I'm not going to treat them as one of my players during practice. I want to treat them with love and care and gentleness and firmness. See, there's similarities between coaching and being a dad, but you can't translate the way that you would coach someone to take on an ISO block the same way that you would hold your son accountable when he disobeys you in the house. Okay, because what's going to happen, and honestly, what happens even with these players that I've consistently got to be careful about and intentional about with building relationship. But what happens with my son and these players, when I do start talking about Jesus, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to superimpose my face on the Father's face, meaning they're going to say, oh, well, if my dad is always disappointed in me, then I guess God is disappointed in me, which is not true. Because in Romans 8:1, it says, therefore, there's no more condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So once we accept Jesus as Savior, the old has passed away, the new has come, and He is forever pleased with you in Jesus. So I don't want them to superimpose my face on God's face. I want them to understand God's love and care for them. So I don't want that to happen. And then two, they'll just see you for what it is. They'll call you a hypocrite. You say one thing, but you do another. I don't want either of those things to happen. I want my face to be as consistent as possible with the Father's face. Now I'm going to fall short. I'm going to fall short over and over and over again. I've got to be able to admit when I'm falling short and be able to say, hey, but I'm not perfect, but there is one who is. I'm sorry I acted out of anger and disappointment towards you and annoyance towards you. Your Father in heaven does not act that way towards you. He is forever loving and forever caring towards you. Doesn't mean that God doesn't have standards. Doesn't mean that there's not a code of conduct. Doesn't mean that He doesn't give us things to follow. But everything that He gives us is for our freedom. It's for our joy, not to limit our freedom, not to limit our joy. Now, that is where some similarities lie between being a coach and being a dad, especially when you think about this love over fear. Okay, so when you think about the standards that you set, as simple as, hey, you're going to sit at the table until we're all finished eating, okay? Or you're going to finish all your food. You're doing it not because you're trying to gain some type of power, not because you have some weird power complex. You're doing it because you care for them. You're doing it because you love them. So when God gives us these things, when He says like, hey, it's best for you to leave sex in the context of marriage, He's not doing it because He's mad at you. It's because He's trying to limit your joy or limit your freedom. He says you have the most freedom when you do it this way. You have the most freedom when you follow me and you trust me. And the reason that we can follow someone when we don't understand what He says for us to do is when we trust the person. If I trust God, I don't have to fully understand why. If I trust Him. Like my son doesn't fully understand why he can't go in the road. Maybe he does now, but I'll tell you, Lucas, who's one, he does not understand why he can't go in the road without holding my hand. Because he's going to get hit. He might not understand that, but if he trusts me, he can follow me, even though he doesn't understand why. When I trust the Father, I can follow the Father because I trust Him, even if I don't understand why. So it comes back to this trust. And not sometimes, all the time, fear can build this wall. I'm not talking about this healthy fear. We'll talk about the fear of God here in a little bit and what that means to have a healthy fear of God. What I'm talking about is this fear like I've always disappointed Him. He's always mad at me. And this fear actually leads to hiding. This is what happened originally in the garden. Think through Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve committed the sin and they ate from that tree, what were God's first words to them? He didn't say, you idiots, where are you? He didn't say that. His first thing was, where are you? Where are you? It wasn't, what have you done? You disobeyed me. It's, hey, where are you? Because what were they doing? They were hiding. They were hiding because they felt ashamed. They felt guilty. They felt condemned. Right? And God wasn't giving them that command not to eat from that tree because He was trying to be mean. He knew the consequences of that. He knew the consequences of that. And you might ask, well, why did God put that tree there in the first place? Why would he give them that option to sin? If there is no choice, there is no true love. There has to be a choice to either obey or not obey, to either follow or not follow. If there's no choice, there's no true love. If there's no choice to not love, then there is no love. There had to be a choice to love. There had to be a choice to love. So with our sons, with our daughters, do we operate in a way that says, hey, you don't have to be fearful of disappointing me? There's not fear. Can you trust me, though? Can you trust that what I say is good? Can you trust that I love you and I care for you and I so badly want what's best for you? Because a loving dad, a loving mom, always so badly, so desperately wants what's best for their kids. So if there's any brokenheartedness, it's only because we know what's best. Like if I tell my son, like, hey, it's not good for you to go get drunk, right? And he goes and he gets all drunk and wasted and all this other stuff. My heart doesn't hurt because he disobeyed me. My heart hurts because it's not good for him. It's not good for him, and I want him to be able to trust me. So I've got to be able to put deposits into that relationship where he knows, like, hey, you can trust me. I love you. I got to be able to present him with options. And then a loving thing too, especially when they're young, is be able to hold firm on what we said. Right? I've got to be able to give those consequences. So for example, if I say, hey, if you don't finish all your food, you can't get dessert. And if he doesn't finish all his food and I give him dessert, then I'm letting him reap this false reward. That's not a loving thing to do. I've got to be able to get him to understand, hey, if I do all of this, then I can get this. But if I don't, there's a consequence to that. Because what we're doing is we're training this trust. Hey, you can trust me. If you do this, then this. Similarly, when it's not just about something as small as finishing your dinner and connecting it to like a treat later, which I know some people are against that, so don't judge me. But like, it's not as small as that. But if it's something later, like, hey, it's not best for you to go and do these things. It's not best for you to go and get wasted and do all this stuff and sleep with a bunch of different women. It's not best for you to do that. Then he will already be in the habit of trusting me and caring for me. And it's really, really important the way that we handle it when they don't meet that standard, or when they don't obey you, or they don't listen to you, or they don't trust you. Do I still come back and say, hey, I love you. I'm here for you. I care for you. Do you understand why I said that now? See how that wasn't fun and it wasn't good? Like, you can trust me. You can trust me. I'm not mad at you. You can trust me. The officiant at our wedding, he talks through this a lot. And what he said was his son came up to him, who's 4 years old, who was 4 years old at the time. He's much older now, but he was like 4 years old. And he was always their one that was like tested boundaries. And the stove was on. And he was like, Daddy, can I touch the stove? And his dad goes, sure. And like his wife like peered around the corner and was like, what on earth did you just tell him? Did you tell him you could? And he's like, hey, hold on. Let's just let this happen. He goes, sure, you can do it. But I want you to know that if you do it, it's going to hurt really, really bad. And depending on how long you put your hand on there, we might have to take you to the hospital. Maybe there's like skin grafts that need to happen, like where they have to cut some pieces of skin out. I mean, who knows? If you put it on there a really long time, you might damage your nerves so bad that we have to like cut off your hand. Like, there's some bad things that happen, but you are free to touch the stove. You're free to touch it. And he like looks at the stove. He looks at his dad. He's like, Daddy, it's going to hurt. Like, yeah, buddy, it's going to hurt. Like, I'm not going to touch the stove. Because he trusted his dad. He wasn't doing it just to be defiant. He's like, wait, hold on a second. This is not good for me. This is not good for me. I want to get my kids to be able to trust me. Trust that, hey, what I say, it's for you. It's for your freedom. It's not to limit your freedom. It's for your joy. It's not to limit your joy. Now, as husbands, gosh, are we creating a relationship where if we're creating a relationship where our wife is just fearful of disappointing us, if we're creating this relationship of expectation and not expectancy, man, it's going to be a really, really tough environment to live in. And I know Lauren and I both have wrongly operated in expectation before, expectation and disappointment. instead of expectancy. But there's this freedom that happens when we operate in expectancy, when we believe the best in them, when we believe the best in the other one. So like if Lauren says like, hey, I'll make us dinner tonight, or if I say like, hey, I'll make us dinner tonight, and then I end up not doing it, does she believe the best in me, or does she immediately think, oh, he doesn't care about me? Do I believe that Lauren's heart towards me is good? Do I believe that she loves me and that she cares for me? If we can operate in that way, we've got a much better chance of having a solid relationship. The thing that I want to talk through is, how do we dismiss the fear that our wife has with us, even with ourselves? How can we help dismiss that fear and let that perfect love of God cast out all fear? How can we do that? So what usually are women's fears when it comes into a relationship? There's this fear, and I believe this is true in Scripture. There's this fear that we would leave her, or that we don't find her lovely, that we don't find her beautiful. So what does it say in Ephesians 5? It says that we should speak over her, that we will lay down our lives for her, and that she is holy and blameless. It says for us to love her the way that Christ loves the church, which is laying down our life, which is humbling ourselves to the point of death on a cross, which means even if we're betrayed, we still love and we still stay there, and to speak over her daily that she is holy and blameless. Man, if we can do that, if we can operate in a way, and not just saying those actual words, but living a life, living that relationship towards her that says, hey, no, you are holy and blameless. If we can believe the best in them, if we can speak life constantly over them, if we can say, hey, no matter what I'm in, there's no other way out for me. You are the one for me. And I am in, no matter what. If we can operate in that, if we can be Christ to her, if we can do that, man, we have a really good shot at an awesome relationship. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but it means it's the constant challenge of operating in expectancy instead of expectation and disappointment. There's this, I'm pretty sure it's like not a true story, but I've heard this before. It was this husband and wife, and the husband had like a laundry list of like expectations for his wife. He's like, hey, here's your roles, here's my roles. You're going to do laundry, you're going to make sure you cook dinner, it's got to be ready by 6, it's going to do this, you're going to do that. I get this laundry list of expectations. And it just built resentment between the two, and eventually they split up. And then one day this wife, she got remarried, and she found a man that just loves her and cares for her and speaks life over her. And she, like years later, she finds that list again of all of these expectations. And she realized that she was doing every single one of those for this new man because there was this relationship of love. And that man never even told her to do it. Now, this is not a way to manipulate your significant other. It's not a way to do that. It's not a way to say, hey, if I love you like this, then you will do all of these things. No, it's not that. It's not arguing for certain role. It's not arguing for that. It's not what it is. What I am saying, though, is that when we love our wives as Christ loved the church, the way that Scripture says, if we humble ourselves and if we can stay in relationship and speak life over our wives, even if they aren't treating us right, even if they're going through a tough time, even if you feel like the world is freaking against you, if you can operate in that, I really believe your wife will come to life. And I know she does the same thing for me the other way. When my wife looks at me and says, I believe in you, you can do it. Because the greatest fear for man is that we don't have what it takes. When she speaks over me, hey, you have what it takes. Not only speaks that over me, but lives a life that truly models that she believes in me, her husband. Gosh, man, I would climb any freaking mountain for her. I just know, again, just to recap all of this, fear will yield some results, but love, connection, and caring for people will yield the most. And it's not about yielding results in relationships. It's not about yielding results in your marriage, but we want a relationship that's full of life. And Jesus has come that we would have life and have it to the full. And what happened on the cross, that fear of disappointment is completely gone. And it's not by our works that we have been saved. It is by grace through faith, so that no one can boast. Jesus paid the price. Jesus did all of the work. Now we just get to be in loving, intimate relationship with him. And what we find is that the more we love the Father, the more the works follow. If you want to be selfless, get to know the selfless one. If you want to give up your life, look at the one who gave up their life for you. Look at Jesus. Look at Jesus. The true power behind all of this, even as a leader, as a dad, as a husband, the true power of all this is to understand that the perfect love of God casts out all fear. If you want to be a leader who operates in humility, look no further than the humble one. Look no further than Jesus himself. Remember how much he saved you from. Remember that you don't have it all figured out. If you want to operate as a humble leader, if you want to create this, then learn to care for your team the way that Jesus cares for you. Love is greater than fear. This is something that I'm going to be thinking about a lot this year, especially with our players. I don't want to build walls. I want to build trust, and I want to build a fearless team. I want to lead a household, my sons who are fearless. I want to have a relationship that is fearless, and ultimately we are pursuing Jesus in everything that we do. Love you guys. Let me know what you think.